Welcome to the TOEFL Listening section. In this section, you will listen to an academic lecture and then answer questions about what you heard. You may take notes while you listen. You will have time to review your notes before answering the questions. Listen to part of a lecture in a university class. You will hear the lecture only once, so listen carefully. After the lecture, you will answer some questions about what you heard. Some questions ask about the main ideas and supporting details. Other questions ask you to make inferences or connections between ideas. Answer each question based on what is stated or implied in the lecture.
Today we will examine the scientific revolution and focus on how figures such as Nicolaus Copernicus and Galileo Galilei altered European worldviews during the Renaissance. When I say scientific revolution, I mean more than a list of discoveries. I mean a transformation in methods of knowing nature and in cosmology that changed how people understood humanity's place in the universe. Let us begin with Copernicus and his model of heliocentrism as presented in De Revolutionibus, published in 1543. Copernicus proposed that the sun, rather than the earth, was at the center of planetary motion. This was not an instant rejection of the Ptolemaic system, but a radical reconfiguration. Copernicus retained mathematical devices such as epicycles while relocating the cosmic center to the sun, and thereby simplifying some long-standing problems in planetary calculation. The Copernican model, therefore, had two important consequences. First, it offered a different mathematical framework to predict planetary positions, and second, it opened a philosophical challenge to geocentrism, and to the idea that Earth, and by extension humanity, were central in the cosmos. Turning to Galileo, his work in the early 17th century provided observational support that made the Copernican model persuasive to many natural philosophers. Using an improved telescope in 1609 and publishing Sidereus Nuncius in 1610, Galileo reported the moons of Jupiter, the phases of Venus, and imperfections on the sun such as sunspots. Each of these observations had significance. The moons of Jupiter showed bodies orbiting something other than Earth, and the phases of Venus were inconsistent with a simple Ptolemaic arrangement, where Venus always lay between the Earth and the Sun. Galileo also emphasized systematic observation and experiments. His studies of falling bodies and arguments about motion began to displace Aristotelian qualitative physics with mathematical description and empirical testing. These scientific practices influenced how knowledge was justified. Rather than relying solely on ancient authority or syllogistic reasoning, scholars began to privilege observable evidence, repeatable demonstrations, and mathematical laws. However, the shift was contentious. When Galileo wrote Dialogue concerning the two chief world systems in 1632 and defended Copernicanism, he was brought before the Roman Inquisition and forced to recant in 1633. The trial illustrates that the scientific revolution was not simply a set of technical advances, but a social and institutional struggle over who could claim authority to interpret the natural world. Consider practical consequences. Improved astronomical models aided navigation, helped refine calendars, and encouraged instruments and mathematics that later underpinned new technologies. In summary, Copernicus initiated a cosmological reorientation, and Galileo provided empirical evidence and methodological innovations that together propelled a broader epistemic shift. Galileo's observations forced people to rethink the position of humanity in the cosmos. When historians refer to the scientific revolution, they emphasize both the discoveries and the change in how knowledge is produced, tested, and accepted. This dual change explains why the Renaissance scientific revolution remains central to modern intellectual history.
Listen again to part of a lecture, then answer the question.
Galileo's observations forced people to rethink the position of humanity in the cosmos.
This concludes the listening section. For more TOEFL practice tests and study materials, visit Spinta.org.